Good morning. Welcome to this week's IGTV. What to do when your teen doesn't care about consequences. Not many things more frustrating when you're doing your best to set clear boundaries and your teen's like, I don't care. Go ahead, do it. I don't care. Whatever. Can't touch me. And you're like, what? Because you feel like you're losing all of your leverage and authority as a parent. And so the normal reaction is to resort to some less than constructive tools to try and get that leverage back so that your teenager cares about something and you can start to create the behavior change that you really want. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. Thank you again so much for joining me. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Allie Payne and I'm a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, and I've been working with parents and teens for 15 years to help them end the painful disconnection, emotional blow-ups, stressful silences to build relationships based on trust and respect. I'm also a retired teen, a very troubled retired teen. And so a lot of what I share is based on my own experience growing up in an absolute authority home, which was very normal for the time, and being someone who really wanted no part of that and was going to do what they were going to do anyway. So part of today is based on my own experience as a teen, as well as what I'm hearing from parents to help give you the tools and strategies to not feel so defeated and disheartened when your teen is acting out in all kinds of ways outside of your boundaries and doesn't seem to matter what consequences you set, they just don't care. All right, let's jump in. So here's the situation. Here's the situation. You are setting boundaries, what you feel are clear boundaries, and your teenager's stepping outside of them consistently. And so I'm not sure what your clear boundary is, but I'm just going to go over what a clear boundary is, just in case. I'm just going to redefine this, okay? A boundary is an emotional currency at a relational level. Boundaries are not used to control or coerce. Boundaries are a statement of what works for you and what doesn't. The other person in the relationship can choose to respect your boundaries or not. That is their choice. You are at choice about how you participate in that relationship based on whether or not that person continues to disrespect your boundaries. Am I being clear? I hope I'm being clear. So here's an example. Let's say you and I are friends, okay? Let's just say you and I are friends. And I'm one of those people who feels really respected when you show up like on time. So if we say we're gonna go for coffee at 10:30 in the morning, you are at the coffee shop at 10:30 plus or minus like a few minutes, okay? Not perfection, but plus or minus a few minutes. And I'm one of those people who's likely to be early. So I showed up early. I'm probably there first, and I probably got us a table. And you show up at plus or minus a few minutes of 10:30, and I feel special. I feel respected, rather than sitting with my tea and scrolling on my phone because you're 10 minutes late, you're 15 minutes late, because when we say we'll meet at 10:30, you're like, yeah, like sometime around 10:30, but like, you know, I'm a busy parent or I'm working or whatever, and I'll get there, you know, and that's okay too. It's just different personality styles. Okay. So what I value as a human being is not what you value. But because you're in relationship with me, and I've made it really clear that when you show up on time for our coffee dates, I feel special and respected, and you choose to make that important to you, even though It's not something you value, but it's something I value. So that's you choosing to respect my boundary. Now, let's take that to the other side. So we have a coffee date for 10:30 and you are consistently showing up at like 10:45. And I feel disrespected. I just don't, I know you're busy and I know you have other things on your plate, but I feel like I'm always second fiddle. I feel like I always am coming second to everything else in your life. And maybe we only get together like every couple weeks. So you show up at 10:45, maybe even like just before 11 sometimes. And I'm like, you know what? I love you and I want to have a relationship with you. But when you consistently show up at well beyond the time that we had agreed upon, I feel disrespected and not important. So it's hard for me to participate in this relationship with you when I feel that way. And you know it because you sit down at the table with your coffee and you're like rushing in and throwing your stuff on a chair and like, so how are you doing? And you can tell I'm pissed off. You can tell I'm pissed. So I say to you, okay, you know what? I don't want to go for coffee with you anymore because I don't want to feel this way in our relationship. So this is what's important to me. And I get if it's not important to you, totally fine. Because remember, I can't change you. I can't change what you value. Okay. I can change the way I participate in the relationship. You getting this? So I say, I'm just not going to go for coffee with you anymore. Maybe we can have some telephone chats, some FaceTime, whatevs. But going for coffee with you, I just end up feeling resentful. And I don't want to feel that way. And you'll be like, okay, I totally appreciate your feedback. Great. Awesome. Let's do that. Okay. So that is how I express a boundary. And I don't try and control you with my boundary. I didn't try and guilt you with my boundary. I didn't try and use emotional coercion with my boundary by saying, well, if you don't show up on time for coffee dates, then I'm not going to be your friend. That's a threat. That's a threat that is wrapped in guilt and a whole bunch of other gooey things. I didn't say, well, if you don't show up for coffees when we have them planned, I'm going to tell all of our other friends that you're just a terrible person. That's also a threat. Okay. So I'm trying to make this relatable, but we are going to turn this toward your teenager. Okay. Boundaries, I'm going to say this again. Boundaries are an emotional currency at a relational level. They do not occur at a behavioral level. They are an emotional currency at a relational level. Boundaries are a statement about what works for you and what doesn't, how you define respect and being disrespected. It is not up to you to change or control someone with your boundaries. It is up to the other person, including your teenager, to decide how they interact with your boundaries. If they choose to disrespect or disregard your boundaries time over time, it is up to you to decide how you choose to participate in that relationship, not by making that other person a piece of crap through shame, guilt, or trying to control, threaten, ultimately. You choose. Don't go for coffee with them anymore. Just don't. But it's not because you're making them out as a bad person or they're somehow a less than human being. It's like, dude, you know what? I get that that's how you roll. Time is like a moving target for you. That's awesome. Love you for that. That's not how I roll, and I don't want to feel resentful in our relationship. So let's just text instead, and let's just, and if you're available for coffee, like I'll let you know where I am, but I'm not going to work around your time. The way that you have a relationship with time is different than how I have a relationship with time. Okay. All right. Tell me in the comments if this is making some kind of sense to you. If you're joining me here on Instagram, again, I want to welcome you. Give me a follow if you don't already. I'm talking about what to do when your teen doesn't care about consequences. And if you're here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and feel free to leave your comments below. We're going to have a sip of the tea. Okay, so let's relate this. Okay, awesome. Thanks, everybody. So I'm glad this is making sense. So I'm going to relate this to your teenager now, okay? And I don't want to make light of this. I sincerely do not. This is one of the most painful, frustrating, emotionally exhausting, disheartening experiences when your teenager, you seem to have no leverage point with them. None at all. Okay, so let's talk about your teen now. Your teenager is, I'm going to just use some examples that parents give me and the way that I participated as a teenager, okay? Let's say your teenager is really rude. Like, I mean beyond, okay, we all have bad days. Beyond that, they are rude and demanding to you on a very regular basis. And you have said, that's not acceptable in this house. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be disappointed, sad. It's okay to have all of those emotions because all emotions are welcome here. What you do with them is really not working for me. I want to support you. I love you. But when you are when I hear you constantly saying things, you know, that is like name calling and things like that, that's not cool. Nope. So first of all, you can remove yourself from the conversation. You simply say, I love you. Your feelings matter to me. I want to hear what you have to say. I will not participate in this conversation if that's the way that you're going to speak to me, because that crosses my line of respect. I believe I deserve respect, as do you. And you just exit. You exit stage left. Okay? Now, let's say it continues to unfold. I was not that disrespectful to my parents in my voice because there would be swift physical action, if you know what I'm saying, if I did that. But what I did do with my parents was I disregarded curfew because I felt controlled. I honestly felt like I was a straight A student. I babysat quite a bit on weekends. I didn't get in trouble with the police. Yeah, I did sometimes a heavy drinking, but I didn't do drugs. I didn't, I didn't shoplift. I was an award-winning athlete. I was a fairly good kid, even though I was a bit of a mouthpiece and I was super angry, very angry because I felt so controlled in my home. And I had a high need for freedom. So I would push back against my parents' curfews by just not paying attention to them. Because I'm like, you know what? Like, I do all of these things. And I felt in my mind that I had earned the right to not have a curfew because I was achieving all of these other success markers. Now, that's subjective. That's totally subjective as a parent. As a parent now, I can kind of get we decided not to set curfews with our kids because they were the same. They were amazing kids at school. They had great friends who I knew, which my parents knew all my friends too. Anyway, so I would disregard their curfew and then my parents would get upset and then they would try and ground me. Grounding worked for me for a really short time until I was just you know what? Screw you. Screw you. You don't get to control me when you won't acknowledge any of the things I am doing. This was me to my parents. You refuse to give me any positive feedback for being a straight A student, for getting my homework done. You don't get called by the school. Being a good athlete, I get myself to practices. I do my own thing. I don't ask to borrow money. I babysit. I earn my own money. I buy my own stuff. Like, you don't get to say when I come and go from this house, because I have earned that right not to have that. Now, is that right? Well, not really. But the more my parents tried to impose the curfew, because I want you to understand this, because there's a connection point missing with your teenager when your teenager is saying, go ahead, fine, take my phone, go ahead, fine, take my car, fine, go ahead, I don't care, do whatever you want to do, don't care. Whoo, has that ever raised the ire in a parent? Because you literally in that moment feel like you have no more leverage. But at that moment, I need you to understand there's a disconnection. So for me, the disconnection was I got literally no positive feedback in my house. Unfortunately, neither did my parents. So they were doing what they knew. I got 0 positive feedback. So I will say that. Are you pointing out the smallest things that your teenager's doing right? Are you affirming character traits, okay, that you see in your teenager that are like positive, like that they're reliable, or how they treat other people? Because this comes from respect. This is all unwinds when you lose respect. So I didn't respect my parents. I will say that honestly. I did not respect them. So I lied to them. I was unreliable to them, but to other people, I didn't lie to other people. I showed up on time with other people. I did what I said with other people, but not with them. It was because I didn't respect them. So you are more likely, teenagers, anybody is more likely to lie to people you do not hold in high regard. That's kind of the definition of respect, is around respect. So when you respect someone, respect comes from connection. Respect is built on appreciation and positivity. Now, you might be like, Allie, you have no idea what's going on in my house. And I'll tell you what, there is no positivity to be found. I understand that. There's still a single point of positivity. If you can affirm what they're doing right, because the more that you focus on what's not going well, first of all, you'll see more of it. That's the reticular activating system. That's how your brain works. If you're convinced that your teenager is the spawn of Satan and they are doing nothing but acting out, then you're going to see more and more of that. So I'm challenging you to find what they're doing right. Teeny infinitesimal things. And affirm and reward that verbal affirmation, okay, with that. So I will start there. Then that helps to build respect, okay? Now, if your teenager is you're saying, look, we are sick and tired of you dissing our curfew. Like, you never come home when we ask. You're always out, so we're up late. We're worried about you. You don't tell us where you are. That doesn't work. And they can be like, well, I work, I paid for my car, I blah, 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 okay? I just wanted you to know where I was coming from as a teenager, is that I felt like I earned that right. Not necessarily true, but I didn't respect my parents, so that didn't help. Your teenager doesn't listen to your curfew. Although I do not recommend using the phone, because that's emotional coercion, so taking the phone, unless the crime has to do with the phone itself, okay? You've tried grounding, that's not working. You are now, what ends up happening when you feel like you have no leverage, you have no leverage, I guarantee you, you will start to use threats and ultimatums. So you will start to threaten things like, oh, okay, well then we're just going to start to remove financial support, like your phone. Or, maybe you help pay for some gas or driving or whatever. And your teenager's like, fine, whatever, I'll just go get my own phone. And then inside, you're like, ooh, you little so-and-so, I'll tell you what. And then you're like, well, then we're going to take your door and your mattress and your, like, this is where you start to go. Because your frustration is leading you to try to find greater avenues to control. Because you're frustrated. You're not a bad parent. I know you're doing the very best that you can in a very, very tough situation. And your teenager's not a bad kid. You are not connecting. There's no connection there. And the more frustrated you get, the more you're going to try and control. Okay? So, here's the thing. Just because you birthed that child or raised that child does not mean that they have the same values and beliefs as you do. I am extremely different from my parents. This is not a moral judgment on them or me. This is not a better or worse. We are so fundamentally different in our values and beliefs in the world that it's very difficult for us to live together. So, I have had teenage parents reach out to me and say, well, my teenager says they're going to move out. Okay. Sometimes what you need to understand is this. You can set boundaries with your teenager, but I promise you, if you're at this point, you are trying to use boundaries to coerce, control, manipulate, and because ultimately your teenager is not being the way you want them to be, you're going to try harder and harder to get them to be the way you want them to be. That will never work. Never has in the history of time, and it never will. That's not what a boundary is. At some point, when you catch yourself, I want you to ask yourself, if you're in this position, my teenager is being totally disrespectful. They're ignoring curfew. They're bringing drugs in the house when we constantly tell them not to bring drugs in the house. They're vaping in the house and we constantly tell them not to. Here's what I need you to do. I am not saying give up your boundaries. Never will. I'm saying be clear when you are at a boundary, which is what works for you and what doesn't. And when your teenager chooses repeatedly to disrespect your boundaries, that's not an opportunity to move to control. That's an opportunity for you to choose how you participate in that relationship. Because boundaries were never intended to control. So sometimes it means getting to a bottom line with your teenager. A bottom line. And this is not an easy place to be. This is absolutely not an easy place to be, and I will never, ever tell you that it is. That you have a sit down with your teenager and you say, look, here is what fundamentally matters to us most in this house. That we feel emotionally safe and respected. And this is exactly what this looks like. Like you have to lay it out. This takes work on your part to get clear. This is exactly what I mean by this. These are words and phrases that we use, like please and thank yous, and I appreciate this or whatever. These are words and phrases that we don't use. We don't call each other names. We don't, constantly cut each other down and tell each other how we're not measuring up. And be careful you're not doing that with your teenager. How they're not measuring up, because that's what ends up happening. What ends up happening when you don't feel like boundaries are working and you resort to coercion and control and threats and ultimatums, what you're saying to your teenager is be the way I want you to be, because the way you're being right now sucks. You're a failure. I don't like you. That's what your teenager is getting. What you mean is, I don't like your behavior. I don't like your choices. What your teenager hears is, you suck. You're a failure. You're bad. And now you're in a power struggle and never-ending, exhausting pissing match that nobody's going to win. I guarantee you. And for certain, you won't have a great relationship at the end of that, and it will probably take a long time to come back from. So just bottom line your boundaries. This is what we say to each other. This is what we don't say. Be specific. When we're upset in this house, we're going to develop some strategies because all emotions are okay. It's what we do with them. That's different. If you're angry, you can say, I'm so angry. I'm angry about this. This is what didn't happen. This is what I wanted to happen. I feel upset. Okay? Yeah, I'm getting to that. What if they don't? I'm getting to that. Bottom line. This is what we say. This is what we don't say. This is how curfew is going to operate. This is how it is. These aren't negotiables anymore. If these boundaries are respected, not followed, because you don't follow a boundary, you follow a rule. Boundaries are respected. Rules are followed. And if you're looking for more compliance, then you are trying to control. Boundaries are not about compliance. Boundaries are about respect. Rules look for compliance because they need to control. Now, we need to have rules in our society in a lot of places. I'm saying this, but in a relationship and parenting, it doesn't work that well with a teenager. They just don't. Their brains are wired for increasing levels of independence, even though their maturity and their processing in their brain isn't quite ready for that level of independence that they are desperately driving for. So it leaves you kind of in the middle dealing with this. Okay. Now, so you lay out clearly your bottom line. This is what curfew looks like. This is what it looks like around the house. You're responsible for your own laundry. I'm not picking it up and, you're going to do your own laundry. You're to help with dinner once a week or, washing dishes twice a week or like whatever it is. Lay it out. Be super, super, super clear. As if someone new you've never met is moving into your home. Get that clear. Okay? And then you say to your teenager, are these boundaries something that you feel that you can operate and within and respect? What are your boundaries? Because this is not a one-way conversation. That's not how relationships work. So then you ask your teenager, what are your bottom line boundaries? What's your bottom line? And they're not going to be able to answer you in the moment. Okay. And I recommend actually giving them fair warning to come to the table with what works and like bottom line, what works for them and what doesn't, to feel respected. Okay. So that you're both dealing with your bottom lines. Okay. Now, there may be some negotiation room in there. There might not be. And sometimes that means your teenager doesn't live with you. I did it for a while. I know other people young people in my life who have chosen to find somewhere else to live. I know parents who have said, we love you. Living like this, though, isn't working for either one of us. And we love you. And we are so sad and feeling disrespected. And most of all, what we want is a relationship with you. But if living together right now means that we are decreasing our chances of having that relationship, then this might not work. Okay, I'm very, very cautious when I say that, okay? But it is happening. This is happening in the world, so I'm going to talk about it. Teenagers are leaving home because they feel disrespected, unheard, judged. Now, that doesn't make you a bad parent. I'm just saying this is how teenagers are feeling. So at some point, you have to have a hard look in the mirror and say, am I spending all of this energy to try and reinforce boundaries? Or am I spending all of this energy to literally try and control my teenager and get them to change who they are because I don't like it? Because see, my parents and I saw so differently in the world that we literally couldn't even have a basic conversation without it turning into conflict. So we kind of got to a bottom line. I was going to help around the house. I was clear about what that meant. I would save my talking back for later, and I just said less. They said less to me and made, financially helped me. We just stopped basically talking that much, but we were operating within each other's bottom line. It was not a fun time. We had no relationship at all, but we were operating within each other's bottom line boundaries. That's how it worked. Do they feel then there is some threat that they will be kicked out? No, because you don't use it as a threat. You don't say it as a threat. You say, can we make this work to live together within your bottom line and my bottom line? If we can't, then what is it going to look like for us? Because most of all, we want you to know that we love you and we want a relationship with you. And constantly being in an argument isn't working. So you start to say, because you start to say, look, if this isn't going to work, then what is? What is going to work? And you ask them the question. You don't say it as, as a threat. Either you obey these, or if you say either or, that's a threat. Actually, it's more of an ultimatum. So no, it's not saying it's, if this isn't going to work, then what will? What is another option? So yeah, if your teenager's taken away from you, then I'm not sure what that situation is. Okay. So if your teenager threatens you that they're going to move out, there's a reason. And I want to dial this back for a second, because this isn't necessarily about having to get to that point where your teenager can't live in the same house as you. Okay? This is about understanding what's going on below the surface. You probably tried setting and holding boundaries, but I'm going to question you. Were they really boundaries? Or were they expectations to get your teenager to be the person that you want them to be? Because again, in my situation, my parents and I we're just totally different people. It's not a moral judgment. We're just very different. And so us living together was so conflictual and painful for all of us that it didn't work. And so I ended up finding a way to do it for my final year at home, but we didn't talk. There was no connection. But if you can look at, at the point where you feel like your boundaries are no longer being respected, I promise you what is happening is you are moving to greater levels of emotional coercion, threats, ultimatums, emotional manipulation, and coercion because your boundaries didn't work. So now you're like, oh hell, I'm going to double down and you are going to be the way I want you to be. It's not going to work. You cannot make someone be the way that you want them to be. What about if I said to you, you can't show up on this Instagram Live and I can't be your friend unless you're willing to be these certain things? Well, that doesn't feel very good. I can say, listen, here's how my Instagram roll, here's how my communities roll. This is how we treat each other. These are the things we say. This is the things we don't say. You can choose to participate or not. Because you see, it's my boundary. It's my choice on how I choose to participate with people. I don't ask other people to be the way I want you to be in order for us to have a relationship. You get to choose. And whether you choose to respect my boundaries or not, I love you anyway. Great. Because I'm going to choose probably not to participate in the relationship with you. But that's my choice. You still get to choose to do you. Okay? So, when you feel like you have no more leverage as a parent, it is likely that you have resorted to these things. And it is likely at that point you are trying to actually change your teenager because you are so frustrated. And I honor and respect that level of frustration. Your teenager continues to act out and be, I don't care, whatever, take my phone, I don't care, take my car, I don't care, ground me, I don't care, whatever. Because they are feeling unloved, disrespected, unheard. They feel shamed, guilted, judged, just because you are different from them. And when they feel that way, they will continue to defy and act out in crazy kind of ways. And this is extremely hard because I can't say this enough. I don't care how many kids you have. I guarantee you at least one of your children is simply not like you. That doesn't make them the spawn of Satan. That makes a very painful situation that's very difficult to navigate. It doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make them a terrible child. So I want you to sincerely look at, because when you are at that point, if you are willing to say, you're right, I've gone, or that was not good, Allie. If you are willing to look at if you've gone beyond a boundary and moved to control, guilt, shame, coercion, the rest of it, and if you can see that, if you can, I promise you, if you just remove that behavior, just remove the trying to control them because boundaries didn't work, you will get less conflict and disrespect instantly. Then you go back to your boundaries. And I will say again, boundaries are a clear communication of what works for you and what doesn't, a definition of what respect looks like. And you cannot make your teenager fall within that. I was very disrespectful to my parents, and they tried harder and harder to control me, and it got worse. So bottom line it. Bottom line, what are your boundaries that define respect without control in your home? Get your boundary to bottom line it too. Bottom line, what are the very basics, knowing that we might be really different people and this feels hard, but we do want a relationship. What's the bottom line for you to feel respected in this home? Sometimes you cannot meet, and sometimes teenagers will choose to live somewhere else. And sometimes you can find that bottom line, which I managed to do with my parents in my grade 12 year. We found a bottom line and we made it work until I left for university. The point of today is this. I know I've kind of rambled and haven't really been clear thought, and I'm sorry about that. Let me just read this comment. Teens age 13 couldn't possibly be out on their own. The plan. So my parents actually looked into sending me to like a foster home or a home for troubled kids. Yeah. And I have other clients who are looking at that with their teenagers. The teenagers, they've tried everything. And they've now given their bottom line boundaries in writing. And they've asked the teenager to say, what is your bottom line? And at the same time, again, I challenge the parents to say, at what point have you also been trying to simply change your teen? Because they're not like you. And they don't comply, and they don't talk to you the way you want. And they constantly have a different opinion, and they're just different people. That doesn't make them horrible. It doesn't make you horrible, but it is a challenge for you. So I want you to be really honest with yourself and get to that bottom line. So teenagers might choose to live somewhere else. The parents might say, this is enough. This is enough. We love you. We want a relationship with you. We know we can't control you. And this is how it's going to work. So if this isn't going to work, we might need to find a different arrangement. We would be horribly sad and heartbroken if it got to that point. But what the conversation ceases to be when your teenager doesn't give a crap about your consequences anymore, and they're at, I don't care. You probably have gone past boundaries to control, coercion, emotional manipulation, threats, and ultimatums. And they don't feel loved or respected. So the conversation needs to move to, that's why I want you to bottom line your boundaries, because bottom lining your boundaries is now a conversation about respect. And that's where the conversation needs to go. Respect. And respect is not something that we talk about very often in homes. It's not what we talk about in families. In fact, our brain, respect is such a huge concept that we have a hard time defining it. So I say to parents sometimes, I want you to write one thing, just one thing on a recipe card, title it, Ways I Feel Respected, and put one simple thing on the top of that card, and then give your teenager a recipe card that says, Ways I Feel More Respected, and they can put one thing on that card. One thing. They might not always be doable, so that's a conversation. How can I make what they're asking for doable in a way that works for me so I don't feel like I'm giving up myself or creating more resentment? Okay, so sometimes you have to negotiate that. Once you get to that, if your teenager and you spend the rest of this month just leaning into that one thing, I know this is this one thing that I can do for my teenager that they feel more respected, and they lean into that one thing, it will fundamentally change your relationship. I promise you. I dare you to try it. I dare you. And then after 30 days, you come up, or the next few weeks, you add number 2, ways I can feel respected more, ways you can respect me more. And then sometimes you negotiate and you learn you do that thing for another month. I hope today has been helpful. This is about understanding and being honest when you have crossed the line beyond a boundary and you are now simply just trying to change your teenager because you don't like who they're being. Well, guess what? They don't like who you're being either. And you trying to change them is the same as them trying to change you, and you have a pissing match and a power struggle where nobody wins, and there's a lot of relational damage that will take years to heal. It's extremely hard when your teenager isn't like you, and they believe different things, and they have different values than you. It's hard. It is possible if you're willing. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe. If you're on Instagram, give me a follow. And if you want more one-on-one or some personalized attention to help you walk through this very difficult time, head to my website, alipayne.com. Under Work With Me, you can book a personal session, or you can join my parenting community, the Empowered Parent Community. It's free for the first 30 days, and this is the kind of thing that we're talking about in that community. I go live twice a month and give personalized attention to my private parenting community members. And again, I thank you for joining me. I'm here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, talking about all hard topics to do with parenting teens. Again, thank you for joining me, and I wish you well. I want to see you again right here next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.